Hi, consider this scenario. You are a listing broker. You have your listing agreement with the seller, which you took for a 6-month period of time. Time has passed. The property hasn't moved as quickly as you hoped. 5.5 months into the listing, that is with 2 weeks essentially left in the listing agreement, the property finally goes under contract. However, that contract is not scheduled to close until after your listing agreement actually expires. So the questions that come up is, do you have a need to extend the listing agreement? And the answer to that question is technically no, you do not have a need. You do not need to extend the listing agreement, and I'll explain why in a minute. And then the next question is well, does it hurt to try? What are best practices in that situation where the closing that's under contract is scheduled to close after the termination of your listing agreement? Now, in order to get the most out of this presentation, I think it would be useful for you as you watch this to have a copy of the Colorado Real Estate Commission exclusive right to sell listing agreement in front of you, because I can make this very clear by walking you through the language in this agreement. So, where do you start? The first place that you start is Section 3.6 identifies what your listing period is. You already knew that. And then, but what is important to focus on is at the end of Section 3.6, 3.6 identifies the beginning date, it identifies the end date, but then the last sentence of Section 3.6 says, broker must continue to assist in any completion of any sale for which compensation is payable to the brokerage firm under Section 7 of this listing contract. What, pray tell, does Section 7 of the listing contract say? Well, what we do is we turn to Section 7, and Section 7 is the section that talks about how much you're owed and when it is earned. When it is earned is addressed in Section 7.3.1 of the contract. And for the simple scenario that we're talking about right now, it is due upon the sale of the property. What does sale mean, John? Does sale mean the property going under contract, or does sale mean the closing of the transaction? And this is an important issue, and your regulators, your forms committee, has not left much ambiguity to that question. The term sale is defined, we're going back to Section 3.5 of the contract, and allow me to read to you ever so briefly. The term sale is defined as the voluntary transfer or exchange of any interest in the property, or the voluntary creation of the obligation to convey an interest in the property, including a contract or lease. What that means is sale means contract. Sale does not mean close. So remember what Section 7.3 said is you earned your commission at the time it went under contract. That's weird. How come you don't get paid a commission at the time it goes under contract? You get paid your commission at the time the transaction closes. Well, there's lots of reasons why you only get paid if the transaction closes. But one of the reasons is the language in the listing agreement says that while you've earned your commission at the time it goes under contract, it is not due to you. It is not payable to you essentially until the transaction closes. Where does that say that in the listing agreement? It says that in Section 7.4 of the listing agreement. The commission obligation applies to a sale made during the listing period. Remember, our sale occurred 5.5 months into a 6-month listing period. So your sale, the sale that we're talking about, satisfies that criterion, or any extension thereof. Next sentence, the commission is payable at the time of the closing of the sale. And it goes on to talk about other scenarios if the transaction doesn't close through the fault of the buyer, through the fault of the seller, but that's not what this video is about. Your commission is payable to you. The seller does not owe it to you until the closing of the transaction. So that language in Section 7.4 is what is being referred to, going back full circle to what I started with. The last sentence of Section 3.6, broker must continue to assist in the completion of any sale for which compensation is payable to you, the broker, under Section 7 of the contract. So, the seller is still obligated to pay you even though it closes beyond the 6-month duration of the listing. You are still obligated to provide services even though the transaction closes beyond the 6th month of the listing. Neither you nor the seller need an extension of the listing agreement. Now, having said that, if you don't anticipate any problems getting an extension of the listing agreement, I would encourage you to do so, so that you don't have to explain everything I just explained to you in this video to your seller client. But there are situations where you may suspect that the seller is looking for any chance they can to stiff you, and the request to get an extension of the listing agreement might give the seller the thought, might plant the seed in the seller that the seller can stiff you, and you may make strategic decisions to not try and get an extension of the listing agreement, and case by case that makes sense to me. Best case is to err on the side of trying to get an extension of the listing agreement, but are you required to get an extension of the listing agreement? No, you are not. Ladies and gentlemen, remember, we live in a complex world. Be careful out there.